Hey everyone, I'm Cappy and welcome to Beyond the Plate. This is a podcast where we sit down with the world's culinary elite to explore their journey into the food industry and the social impact they have made in their communities. If you're new to the pod, welcome. If you've listened before, we're glad you're back. Today's episode, we sit down with someone who's a champion for West African cuisine. In fact, he recently announced that he'll be opening a new Ghanaian restaurant in Washington, D.C. called Elmina. I remember being at South Beach Wine and Food Festival a couple years ago, and a lot of people were talking about Eric Adjepong, how kind he is, how talented he is. Over and over, I kept hearing this. So I'm really excited for you all to learn about what makes this guy so special. Let's go Beyond the Plate. This episode is brought to you by our friends at PepsiCo Foods. All right, everyone, super pumped to have our new friends at PepsiCo Foods join us this season on the pod. Truth be told, Frito-Lay was a partner last season, and Frito-Lay is part of the PepsiCo Foods family, so it's like some of us were family, and now we're all family. All right, here's the deal. Over the years, we brought you memorable conversations and stories that have shaped or are shaping today's food culture. So on that note, I want to share PepsiCo Foods' recent announcement of establishing their first ever culinary advisory board. From chefs and authors to food scientists and entrepreneurs, PepsiCo Foods has brought together 6 industry-leading culinarians, and I have the privilege of being one of them. Together, we serve as strategic advisors to help further the culinary journey at PepsiCo Foods, and we're really working to inspire new ways for people to experience PepsiCo's iconic food brands and bring more smiles and culinary experiences to the table. To me, this initiative is a game changer for the food industry. If you want to learn more about PepsiCo Foods, visit PepsiCo.com. Follow them on social media at PepsiCo. PepsiCo Foods, we thank you. All right, we are going to start with our audio test. So for our audio test, we usually have our guests name 5 of something. So let's go with 5 of something for you. Name 5 ingredients we typically see in Ghanaian cooking.
5 ingredients that you'll typically see in Ghanaian cooking. Wow. Garlic, tomato, peanuts, groundnuts, shrimp in all forms, dried, fresh, fermented, it's all there. And then cassava, I would say cassava.
All right, dude, you sound good. Let's do it. Today's guest is an award-winning chef, host, and activist. You may know him from Top Chef All-Stars, or one of the 97 shows he's hosted or been featured on Food Network. He's also an author, has a collaboration with Crate & Barrel, and serves on the inaugural PepsiCo Foods Culinary Advisory Board. He's even been named one of People Magazine's sexiest chefs alive. Why didn't you lead with this when we spent a day and a half together? Last but certainly not least, he's a proud father to a 6-year-old daughter. He does it all while celebrating his deep roots in West African cuisine. And why does it feel like he's just getting started? Please enjoy this episode as we go beyond the plate with Chef Eric Adjepong.
Cappy, you got me there, man. That intro was hilarious. I wasn't ready. Thank you, man. What's going on, bro?
It's good to have you, man. You know, when I was doing some of the research, I was like, this guy, like we talked in a room, like all of these culinary advisory board members. And if that was me, I would have led with that. I would have been like, first off, I'm the sexiest chef alive.
Dude, that was probably the most awkward yet flattering phone call I think I've ever received in my life. It was right after Top Chef, and I got a call from Meredith. I think that's the parent company for People Magazine. And they led off like, hey, this is going to be really awkward, so I hope you're braced. But we really like your style and everything you're doing. Would you be interested in being on this list? And I'm like looking around for the camera in the room, like Modern Family or The Office, like what's going on? But yeah, I don't lead with it because it's freaking, I don't know, man. It's embarrassing. I don't know. I don't even know how to say it. Yeah.
For anyone who missed the recent announcement, Eric, myself, and some other culinarians are fresh off a launch of PepsiCo Foods' first ever culinary advisory board. How fun is this, man? Let's give everyone a quick rundown, shall we?
Yeah.
Long story short, Eric and I both are working with PepsiCo Foods, which encompasses brands like Fritos, Doritos, Cheetos, Lay's, Stacy's Pita Chips, Quaker, so many more. They have over 35 brands, but we're working with them on their newly formed culinary advisory board. The company's on this culinary journey to evolve people's experiences with their brands and forge these joyful food moments and meals. This means inspiring new uses of these foods. It could be sparking new traditions in the kitchen, creating more meaningful ways for people to connect through food. It's a bunch of different things. Eric, you want to share a little bit more on the board and who's part of it?
It's a pretty cool group of folks. You know, when we went to Texas and we sat in the PepsiCo room, they mentioned a stat that kind of blew my mind. They're in 98% of homes in America, which is absolutely insane. So to your point, man, 35 different brands plus in the PepsiCo lexicon, and they do great work, but they're looking to take it to the next step and kind of look for the next horizon. And that's when they tap folks like me, Andrew, Tiffany Derry.
Yes, and Ellen Bennett from Headley and Bennett, Tyler Malik from Salt and Straw Ice Cream, and Ali Bouzari, who's this scientist meets chef from Pilot R&D. So fun to watch how his brain works.
Yeah, Ali's insane. Almost like a culinary Avengers sort of thing, right? Where we use our minds and our skills from different parts of the industry. What I loved about the group, and at least like the casting of it, is that everyone's coming from like a different sector and like a focus, even though we're all within the same industry. So you're going to get different perspectives. We're going to get different outlooks. And I'm really just excited and honored. Honestly, this is obviously PepsiCo is a massive brand. So to be tapped by a big brand like that, you know, it's pretty cool and humbling. So definitely up for the task and ready for everything up at hand, man.
I want to go back to you, to where it all started. When I go to chefadjepong.com, the first thing I see, like on the website, it says building a table between two continents. I want to know, who is Eric Adjepong and how does this represent you?
Yeah, that's, I was going to say, it's really well stated. It's my website though, yeah. It's like, yeah, it sounds great. Dude, it's weird, man. Not weird, but different in the sense that I think I have a similar first-gen American story, even though I come from Ghana. I talk to a bunch of other first-gens here in the States, and even though we're coming from different parts of the world, our experiences are very, very the same. Having parents to come to a new world and try to set up a life essentially from scratch, and you're bringing in another culture, you're bringing in another mindset, lifestyle, and then you have children in a completely different world. And what do those children look like? And that's me. You know, I grew up right between very traditional West African Ghanaian home with all of the celebrations and the milestone moments with food and culture and music and everything that's West Africa, but we're doing it in New York City. I grew up with these really traditional like ties throughout culture and just growing up. But then that dichotomy of just, you know, living next to a Spanish friend and an Albanian friend and a Jewish friend and a Caribbean friend, and that kind of melting pot that New York City is. I'm so blessed to fall in this industry because I remember going to different homes and having latkes and having rice and peas or whatever braised cabbage that my friend Shaprim was having with his Albanian family. You know, like that to me was like my childhood, but also a very traditional West African childhood too. So two different worlds, man, bringing in what I know and what I love about West African food and culture and everything, but then also the mix and the melting pot and how diverse coming from New York City and that food scene is as well.
You grew up in the Bronx. Were your siblings all born here as well?
Yeah, so kind of split. I'm one of four, and my older brother, older sister were born and raised in Ghana, and they grew up in Ghana. And then me and my younger brother were born here in the States and grew up here. So my sister and brother came to the States when they were in high school, so like sophomore, junior year. And that I lived in Ghana for a little bit, from like maybe 2 to 5. I stayed there for some time. So I had like really faint memories of my brother and sister and cousins and, you know, all my family in the continent of Africa. But when my brother and sister came to the States for the first time, that was really like meeting my older brother for the first time and living with them and getting their personality and all that as well. So, and I love it, man. My sister now to this day is one of my best friends, also probably my biggest thorn, but she's awesome. I love her to death. My younger brother, my older brother as well. We're so close. And just to think about how we grew up, essentially, that true split and to kind of meet essentially halfway in our childhood is a pretty cool story.
That's really interesting. What were meals like in your house growing up?
Yeah, a lot of traditional West African dishes. I remember like my early childhood memories, my first things are eating was like fufu, which is steamed plantain and cassava that's been pounded and steamed. And it's so supple and soft. It's like a baby food intro. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of what a lot of Ghanaian babies start to eat when they're young. And you can pair it with like a soup and a sauce and stuff like that. So I remember eating that. And then jollof rice, like a West African. I always say if there was an alien to drop in the middle of the region and ask for like the most popular dish, what jollof rice would probably be get. One of my favorite things to eat, and still to this day, I can take that down 3-4 days a week. So yeah, a lot of that, a lot of rice, man. We eat a lot of rice. So wache is another really big like rice and beans dish made from dried sorghum leaves that kind of bleed out this beautiful like red magenta color, black eyed peas. It's almost like a smorgasbord, man. It has everything thrown at it. There's fish, there's that shrimp paste that I was mentioning earlier, spaghetti. I have no idea how that got on it, but it's there. Like so many different things, and you kind of just choose your own adventure on the plate. Banku and fried fish and all the stews and soups and things like that, man. But then also what was cool is my mom loved to cook, and as she was kind of understanding the American culture and palate, wanted to really incorporate a lot of more quote unquote American dishes into her kind of repertoire. So started eating a lot of hamburgers and like spaghetti. This is low hanging fruit as far as what American food is and what my mom would think. So definitely sloppy joes and everything like that. So it was a real cool mix of, what any kid, I guess, in New York City would want to eat as a 13-year-old, but then also what you would definitely be eating if you were in Ghana as a 13-year-old, for sure.
Was mom a good cook?
Well, second best cook in the family. But no, man, she's awesome. My mom is a fantastic cook. I really get, I think, the love to bring people to food from her. That's like her superpower. She relies on that. That is her hallmark. When people come to her home, they expect food, whether it's in the fridge, ready, kind of like stocked up, or it's on the table. She takes a lot of pride in feeding people. And I think I picked that up from her as well.
She critique you?
Yeah, no, but it's a humble critique. So my mom came over, I'm in Maryland now, and my mom came over from the Bronx to help out with my daughter the other day. And she had brought some jollof rice that she made in New York, but I had made some jollof rice here. So we had a little jollof off. It was kind of funny.
I love that.
We warmed it up side by side, and we both had, each other's bites. And I said for forever, man, that my mom makes like the best jollof, period, hands down. But she that day was like, I got to give it to you, man. This is pretty good. I think you take the mantle. So I think, she's a great cook. She's an amazing, amazing cook. Her feel, I think, is so impressive, man. She's not one of those recipes. She's cooking and it's all by feel. It's all by sight. And really a hallmark, I feel like, of a true home cook and really a great cook, period. But she's got that in spades, man.
That's so cool. You see that in like everywhere from Jamaica to Philippines to I watch like someone make rice, something as simple as rice. And I'm like, how do you make that so good every time? You're like using the line in your finger.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's these like inexact sciences that for whatever reason, they work every single time. There's no rhyme or reason, but my mom has the perfect thumb, like her finger for rice. It's hilarious, man. But it really is a testament to the different type of style of cooking and one, how comfortable people are in the kitchen as well. There's people who can read a lot of books and still maybe have to reference a cookbook as they're going along. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But then there's just people who, I guess, just have more of an innate sort of relationship with the kitchen. And for whatever reason, just it works. It's kind of like when you're, in your own kitchen, right? And you're cooking and you're in the flow, you know what your spoons are, you know where your forks are. Like you're just in rhythm. You're opening drawers and you're going versus like working in a new kitchen and you're kind of asking where certain things are. You're a little bit out of your wheelhouse. I think it's kind of the same thing. And watching my mom go and just be super comfortable in her own setting is pretty impressive through the years.
Love that. So growing up in the Bronx, you said you felt not quite American enough and not quite Ghanaian enough. You use this as a basis for your children's book, yes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Finding identity is important for everyone as they're growing up and finding their place in the world. And I think by the time I got out and, middle school started and I really started to at least understand how I was identified through the world and through the space and where I was going and how people saw me, I noticed that there were things about how they described my identity that I probably wouldn't have in the beginning. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's a separation here. Because in my eyes, coming from Ghana, that was like the first thing that was instilled in me. It's faith, it's who you are, it's having pride in that. And then you go to Ghana, at least I would go to Ghana or go to these Ghanaian spaces and having that installation of like pride and self-worth from, they say charity starts at home, from my parents and siblings and things like that. But sometimes I would go to these like a birthday party or a church event and I'm speaking in a very American accent. And, you have aunts and uncles that are like, you're not as Ghanaian as everyone else here too. So that's when I really started to notice that like in the world outside of my Ghanaian community, I am an African-American man. If you ask a little bit more, you might find out about my Ghanaian roots. If I go to a Ghanaian space, I'm more of an American man. And I had to even almost explain my Ghanaian roots. It was just that kind of coming of age, honestly. That's truly what it was. I saw that to be a really cool moment to talk about now as an adult, about the time that I try to figure out identity and try to figure out self-worth. And I'm so happy that food was there for me at a young age, because it really helped me take pride in like understanding different people from different parts of the world. Even though we're all technically kind of eating the same thing, we all have a very unique kind of play and spin on how you make your curry, or I don't know, marinara sauce or matzo ball soup. Everybody's grandma makes a different matzo ball soup. Everybody's grandma makes a different curry, or jollof rice, or whatever the case is. Just really understanding that and taking pride of like my tribal, even though there's so many different versions of it. What does my mom and my aunt and my, and the people that taught her, how did they teach her how to make this food, and how is she teaching me? And that pride really swelled up to the point of wanting to write a book and almost kind of write a love letter to my younger self, and really kind of just say like, hey, stay the course, be proud about who you are. And this food is really a great kind of avenue to talk about your culture and the places that you've been.
I need to buy that book, dude. Sankofa, is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, sir. Exactly. Yeah. So Sankofa is
literally on Amazon right now.
Oh, cheers, bro. Thank you, man. Thank you. It's a West African symbol that means it's not taboo to go back and make things right or to make amends. And I think it was a perfect title for the book, because that's essentially what I was doing, is going back. That's essentially what the main character in the book is doing too, is having these like flashback moments with his grandfather. And really each and every time they think about food in a very intimate way, the more and more he becomes proud about who he is and the stuff that his family cooks. So it's pretty cool.
Did you like help your mom in the kitchen as a kid? Like when did you really start to care about food?
You know what? I had sweet duties. All the savory stations were taken up in the kitchen, man. Like my mom was executive chef, my sister CDC, my dad was like a part-time sous, and no one did any sweets. There was no pastry done. There was not. So that's how I kind of infiltrated the kitchen, man. I started working on box cakes. I remember I thought I had it all, man. I thought I was the man. I used to go to the grocery store and get the box cakes and make them and design them. And then after that, I was like, all right, I can graduate and just start making the cakes myself. And I started doing that from scratch. And this is maybe like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. And then started turning those cakes into cupcakes and started designing them. And then slowly but surely started just making more savory food in the kitchen. And next thing, I'm like right next to my mom and my aunt and uncle in the kitchen, kind of helping out. But it wasn't really up until I started college is when I really had, I guess, the pride. I don't know if pride's the right word, but just like the gumption, the gonads, just be in the kitchen, be like, all right, guys, I got this. You know what I mean? And start doing my own thing.
Like the confidence.
The confidence. There you go. Yeah, exactly. There you go. The confidence to do it. That was around college. But ever since then, man, just watching my mom. Yeah.
And where'd you go to college?
So I went to school. I graduated from Johnson & Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah. So studied for culinary arts and in culinary nutrition, and then made my way back to New York City and thought, like many kids back after school, that I was like, I had it all and it was a hot shot, and quickly was humbled by New York City. And I worked with Mark Forgione at Forge Restaurant, which is one of the best, hardest experiences, but also, and I look back at it in retrospect, one of the best experiences I've had.
Was that your first kitchen job after culinary school?
No, I worked in a spot called Nuella. I worked for Chef Adam Shop and Eric Ramirez, who owns Lama San and Lama Inn now. So that was my first gig outside of school, and then rolled into Forge for about a year and change. And it wasn't my first culinary job outside of school, but it was like the first real experience, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like really getting a feel for like the rigor of running or just being in the kitchen in New York City, the late nights, getting on the train at 1 o'clock in the morning to head back home and then do it again, and all of it, man. And it was, that's where I cut my teeth. And I worked there. I worked at Rouge Tomate as well. That was open for some time.
I remember that.
Yeah, Rouge Tomate was over on 60th Street in the East Side. That was a really cool concept, just like a nutrition-focused restaurant that I had interest in because I had a background in nutrition after graduating from school. So that was a really cool moment for me and helped open my eyes to a lot. But after that, I moved to London, England to study for my master's out there for a little bit as well.
Who inspired you to go to culinary school, and why culinary and nutrition?
The inspiration and really the idea behind culinary nutrition probably started as soon as I knew I wanted to be a chef, which was like, again, 6, 7 years old. Coming from Ghana, that West African background, and to the story of a lot of immigrant families, if you're not a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, then you're probably not something that your parents are proud of. You know what I mean? Like, it's an uphill battle. So me telling my folks that I wanted to be a chef was just like, a chef for what? Like, we came all the way over here for you to cook? Like, no. So that stayed in the back of my mind, even though I got the support from my mom and my internal family. And it was the external community that was sometimes a little down on the idea. To be honest, Cappy, bro, I went to culinary school, Johnson Wales University, and did culinary nutrition almost like a safety net. You know, I could work at a hospital, I could do, you know what I mean? Whatever with the nutrition background. And I really wanted to lean on that. But then also, as I did it to kind of appease my parents, it was like I fell into a rabbit hole that I actually enjoyed. Like, I was learning more about the food and really understanding the bridge between making a good meal and what is it doing to my body and my mind and my, and soul and all that. So the almost obligation became something that I picked up willingly. Not obligation, but the pressure of like wanting to make my parents proud. That turned into, I don't know if that's kind of like a PTSD type thing, if I'm just turning trauma into like a driving force, but it was, and it worked. And my mindset after school was very like nutrition focused and obviously putting together a great plate of food. But there was a lot more to that pie that I felt like I wasn't necessarily knowledgeable on. And that's really what made me want to go to London and study some more.
I was seeing some things about like understanding or embracing like cultural identity and your cooking and whatnot. Did you always have that, or was there a moment in school that like really clicked?
I think in the opposite, or in the reverse rather, I think when I was in school, I noticed how many other cuisines I would study and practice on and cook, but that were not African. And I loved it. Like I found it amazing, studying Asian cuisine, East Asians, South American, Indian cuisine, European, classic American, classic French. But Africa, the second biggest continent, was never represented in maybe the 4 years that I went to school. And to me, that was like the spark. I'm like, why? Why is that? The food, there's so much story and there's so much, think about like classic American dishes and the ties that a lot of them have to like West Africa or just Africa in general. And man, the amazing kind of like culinary things that the continent has given the world. To not cook or try those ingredients or to talk about that in a day of class was very disheartening to me. As I noticed myself going through school, I think I noticed that maybe like the end of junior year, I'm like, dude, I'm almost done with school and I haven't heard anything about like food from the continent of Africa.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So to me, that was the spark. I don't think I ever had it to be where I was going to just like focus specifically on West African or food from the Caribbean. But then as I'm growing into my work and understanding the craft and industry a little bit more, I start to notice that what I thought separated me and made me feel outcasted was also the thing that's going to be the hallmark for me. If I can kind of like hone in that West African, Ghanaian sort of like vibe, it's how I think about food anyway, because it's how I grew up. It's the flavors that I'm very used to. It's the ingredients that I'm used to smelling and seeing. If I can weave that into like my classical training and just the way I think about food and that flavor profile with just how eclectic I think my mind is when it comes to food, I think I'm cooking with gas here, because that's maybe something that hasn't really been approached. Because even me, again, in a really big school, shout out to Johnson Wales, I love it, had no sort of like Africans, just even a class or a 40-minute session. So to me, as I was in junior college, I think I noticed that was probably the path that I wanted to take. And then I think going on Top Chef really, like, I was able to preach that on the highest mountaintop, so to speak.
And it's interesting. I was watching your CBS Early Show piece, and you told that story that when you were on Top Chef, apologies, I don't know if this was on air or behind the scenes, there was another contestant that was like, yo, bro, cool it with the African cuisine or something.
That to me, it's wild, man. I don't hold grudge, try not to at least. I don't fault that chef present day for saying that. Because ignorance is a dangerous thing. When you're ignorant, you say silly things sometimes. So I lean on the fact that he just didn't know, he wasn't aware. But in the moment, as it happened in that real time, I remember just like almost being, that moment in The Last Dance where Jordan's looking at it, he's like, yeah, I was pissed off. Like, finding a reason to like tick you off. Yeah. I use that as fuel. Like that, I was upset. Like that, I'm going to use that to beat you, So if you don't want me to cook African food, I'm just going to double down, triple down, quadruple down on it. And I'm going to beat you every single way. That makes sense using these ingredients and using these techniques. And I did it all the way up to the last episode. It was wild. Almost won.
I mean, like how you explain that hit me so hard. I hope I'm not as ignorant that I would say something like that. But you were like, you don't say to a Japanese chef, yo, dude, cool it with the Japanese food. Or to an Indian chef, yo, man, cool it with the Indian food. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, shit.
You wouldn't do that. I mean, like if one chef, and not to single out any sort of chef, because there's so many amazing talents that came in and out of the show Top Chef. But I think of like a Brooke Williamson who does hyper coastal cuisine. If you took Brooke out of that element and took that out of her repertoire, who is she? That's her identity. If you took making pasta and the art and the science of making pasta out of phlegm and sass those hands, like that is their identity. And that's why people come to them for that specific skill. So to tell a chef not to do what essentially got them there is wild to me. So, again, understand the ignorance. That was the first time really in 16 seasons that chef was really putting out West African food on Top Chef. So in of a sense, you're kind of shaking up the scene a little bit. You're introducing something that people haven't seen before. And I get that. And I get the ignorance through that objectively. But again, like when it happened, man, I was just like, all right, I'll just keep that in my back pocket and just go hard and hard and hard. But that was a moment that actually happened. And now I'm trying to build an empire from that.
Hey everyone, there's more of our conversation with Chef Eric Adjepong after we make a quick pit stop at the bar. We're doing something fun this season with our friends at Ford's Gin, and they're creating custom recipes based on the episode you're listening to right now. We're happy to be back with Joe Brook, Trade Advocacy Manager for Ford's Gin in Los Angeles. He created a drink inspired by Eric's love of West African flavors and ingredients. Joe, what's the good word?
All right, we're going to go to Ghana for this one. I'm calling this one the Ghanaian Gimlet, or the Ghanaian, however we choose to pronounce it. This is the area that Chef draws his inspiration from. Obviously, it's a fusion of so many different flavors. And though I've never been there, I know that gin has a huge history back in the day. It's a very popular beverage, still to this day, out in Western Africa. I didn't want to do something as basic as just a G&T with a couple of flavors thrown in there. So I wanted to change the form and have it be a gimlet. So I came up with the Ghanaian Gimlet. And if you want to make it, here's how we do. We're going to start with 1.5 parts Ford's Gin, 1 part fresh squeezed lime juice, 1/4 part tonic syrup, that's essentially the quinine and the sugar in tonic water without the water, or fizz, 1/2 part mango puree, fresher the better, and then 1/2 part of simple syrup. You throw all that together and you're going to add a little bit of grated ginger in there. That's to taste. You can have a little bit just to complement all the flavors, almost imperceptible, or you could have it be a wonderful ginger dominant drink. There's no wrong answers here. Shake it all, strain it over fresh rocks, and garnish it with a skewered lime wheel and a mango chunk. It's a very crushable drink that is applicable across the spectrum of a lot of the food that Chef Adjepong cooks.
Love it. And love a crushable drink. And I feel like Eric's going to love this one. And I know I'm going to love this one.
I hope so.
To get the recipe for this cocktail, check out the episode notes in your podcast player. To learn more about Ford's Gin, go to fordsgin.com and follow them on social media at Ford's Gin. Please drink responsibly. Ford's London Dry Gin, 45% ABV, Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Ford's Gin is a registered trademark. Ford's Gin. Shake up the journey. Okay, so culinary school to some kitchens, then you moved to London to get your master's in public health. Why?
So that was kind of like a pivotal crossroads. The year was maybe 2012. And here's a pretty cool story. I try to condense it as much as possible. But there was a call to work as a line cook at a Fault restaurant in Frederick, Maryland. And one of my mentors at Johnson & Wales University knows how big a fan I am of Brian and Michael Voltaggio. These guys are like, to me, when I was in culinary school, I'd watch Top Chef and just follow their story, and just still, even now in 2024, think they're the best, some of the best chefs in America, period. So I got the word that Brian Voltaggio was looking for a chef, and I'm in New York City. This restaurant's in Frederick, Maryland, about 4 hours away from each other. And I'm like, all right, I need to find a way to get to this restaurant ASAP. I got to work for this man. So I'm calling around. I'm a broke, just fresh out of college student. And I called my sister, and my brother-in-law, her husband, has relatives that live in Frederick, Maryland. So he calls them up and it's like, hey, I have a favor. My brother-in-law wants to come and cook and stage for a restaurant in the area. Can he stay with you guys? So I'm now took a bus all the way from New York to Maryland. I stayed with a family that I barely knew, and I staged at Vault for 2 days. And again, this is a very long story, but Brian Voltaggio was not there. He was working on a project in India at the time. He gets back the second day of the stage, and this is my first time meeting like somebody that I admire for years. And I'm in his restaurant. I did so well the first day that I actually got the job offer, but the sous chef wanted Brian to come in and really offer it, the position himself. So I remember the second day in the morning, Cappy, I get in the kitchen, I'm waiting for my duties. Brian's there and he walks right by me. Doesn't say a word, doesn't say nothing. And I'm just like, all of my hopes and dreams just kind of just melt. I'm like, oh, dude, like, what the hell? So I do the day, I get it done, I go home, I have no word from Brian. He's clearly coming back from India and just has a whole bunch of stuff that, is going on. Maybe a couple of days later, on my way back to New York, I call my cousin Evelyn, who lives in London, and I tell her everything. And I tell her how disappointed I was when he walked right by me. And she says, how crazy would it be if you just moved to London and got your master's? And I'm like, I'm never going to do that. That's stupid. A couple of days later, Brian Voltaggio calls me and he apologizes. He's like, hey, man, listen, I just got back from India, super busy. I know I was just like probably zipping a million miles an hour in the restaurant. I wanted to officially offer you the job. We thought you did a great job or whatever. So as that happened, there was maybe like a day or two in between. But I thought about the offer that my cousin made. And I'm like, you know what if I actually just go to London? What would that look like? As that idea kept ruminating in my head, Brian calls me a couple of days later and I actually decided no, I'm going to go to London and I'm going to study for my master's. He gave me full blessing. He said, listen, man, whenever you're ready and if you ever want to come back, you have a job. So that was sweet. I go to London, I get my master's, I study University of Westminster. And then here's the cool part. I come back to the States after I graduate and I do Top Chef. And there's a mentors episode towards the end when I'm like on my way to the finale. And my mentor is Brian Voltaggio. He comes back, he hears about this. It was a really great episode, really great moment. And then the next season, I get invited to do Top Chef All-Stars, there in which Brian Voltaggio is a contestant.
Oh,
so
shit.
Now your idol is now your rival. And we're so close that we're actually staying in the same room, in the same house. So I'm really like fully getting a download on who this man is. And he gets a download on me. Until this day, man, one of the closest chef friends and just guys that I have in my life, and a mentor and just a really cool all around dude, man. So that was the story about London, but then also the story about Mr. B-Vault. Yeah, Brian Voltaggio.
I love that so much. Do you just come back from London and try out for Top Chef?
Yeah, pretty much happened very soon after. I didn't cook much in London. I staged in a couple of places, but for the most part, I was studying and being broke. Honestly, man, I was poor. Just trying to figure it out and eating those $3. It was like the 3-pound meal deals from Tesco, half a sandwich and a soda and drink. That was my lifeline.
Did you like that education? Because that's very different from a culinary school.
Completely different. But it was great. It was good. Kind of like working left brain, right brain, where you have the culinary and you're doing all the technical and handsy stuff. But then the other side is like the qualitative work. What do you do with the knowledge? How do you apply it? What's the wisdom that comes out of that? And that to me really bridged the gap in my mind to be able to work both, and when I came back from London to the States, that was my mission. I just wanted to kind of bridge the gap between knowing how to cook a great meal and what that great meal is going to do for, a community at large, whether it's a state, a country, a city, whatever. So Top Chef happened soon after. I started working in New York privately for a while and started building a clientele and started doing dinners. And then I moved to DC. And then DC came, Top Chef season 16. That was probably the first time. And again, I've been a huge Top Chef nut since maybe season 3, season 4. But that was the first time that I remember that they announced the city before the cast. Usually when the new season of Top Chef is out, they'll say, hey, here's our 13 or 15 chefs that we've casted for the season. They're coming from all these different places in America. In a couple of weeks, we'll let you know exactly where they're going to, be competing. They flipped it. So they said, hey, we're going to be in Kentucky this year. We're casting for Top Chef. So I got the word. I went to Kentucky and I just did like recon work. I just ate my way through the city, had all the bourbon, had all the food. I just really wanted to understand like the culinary palette of the city. So when I was casted, I know that helped tremendously. There was maybe like 3 or 4 challenges that I was like, oh, I remember because I had this or I tried this or whatever. So there was references that I could help. And a show like that, man, it's all about the margins, man, the little things that you can do to really like separate yourself from all the other amazing talent. And little things like that definitely help for sure.
Did you like competing?
I love competing.
Were you competitive going into it or are you competitive?
Yeah, that's one that I'm starting to slowly self-realize. I've always been competitive. I always loved sports. I ran track, did football. So competition is big, but it's not something that like fuels me to a point of like derangement. Like I can contain it, if that makes sense. And when it comes to competition, especially on this highest level, you almost need a little bit of that like derangement. You got to like tap into some like dark shit.
I wonder what would have happened if that person like didn't say cool it, because like you talk about Jordan and like the last
exactly, what would have happened?
Jordan literally used that to drive him. Like it's incredible how he used that to drive him. You know?
And that was literally my push. It was like, oh, okay, I probably would have taken less risks. I think all the risks that I did they were risky, but they were calculated, and for the most part they worked. But I think I pushed myself because it was just like, it was a big like effort moment. Like, when else am I ever going to have this opportunity to do this type of food or tell these type of stories? So go for it.
Do you think it's made you continue to take risks like in your businesses?
No. Well, in general, yes. I think being an entrepreneur, you always have to take risk and do that calculated. So yes, in that regard, but no, because I feel like it's formulaic now. I feel like the process in which I'm educating, I'm well within my wheelhouse right now. I'm not stepping out of my lane, and there's no risk, or I don't feel any sort of, there's no risky nature to that. I'm so comfortable in my own shoes, talking with authority about the food that I love and working with people that also love food that they love with authority. And like that sort of synergy makes me feel like I'm in a safe space, and I don't feel that push at all, to be honest. I feel like I'm in a really great groove.
You mentioned calculation or formula, and I think I agree with you from a food perspective, but you've started to create this brand. Like a collab with Crate & Barrel isn't, I don't think, so calculated. It's pretty amazing, like what you did and worked on. Definitely. So whether that's risk or opportunity, I think it's pretty amazing that you were able to do that. When something like that comes up, do you jump right in, or what's your process for a project of that nature?
Yeah. Ooh. To kind of go back a little bit, Cappy, I am, we talked about in the beginning, maybe the first few minutes, about identity and where I come from. But then the first thing I also mentioned was like faith, right? And faith was probably the number one thing instilled in me and how I view my world, at least my POV in the world. So nothing comes to me without like the higher powers sort of like will for it. If it's truly not mine and not for me, then I shouldn't be bothered by it at all. So when I say formulaic, I really mean it in the sense of like, I'm working and taking the steps in my sort of path that I don't really see me going, and I can't do what Cappy does as well as Cappy does, and I can't do what Ellen does or Tiffany or Ali does as well as everyone else does it. So my own kind of world, in my own space, in my lane, yes, I'm doing some pretty cool things and partnering up with some really amazing people, but I feel like it's all a part of, I say this often, if I was like a musician, I'd still be talking about West African and Ghanaian food. If I was a painter, I'd still be doing West African, and it's in me. So now that I have this kind of like background in food, that West African sort of like culture and nature comes out in lifestyle, because food is a part of lifestyle. Food is a part of culture. Food is a part of our daily kind of like world. So I think the collaboration with Crate & Barrel, seeing that they're a massive lifestyle brand, they saw what I'm doing and the beauty of the two cultures, bringing in that New York and bringing that Ghana, West African culture. And they wanted to be a part of that. And to me, it is amazing objectively. I will never, ever doubt that. It's a huge blessing to have a partnership like that. But I think in a very humble, but then also like inward way of thinking about it, this was set up for me to do because it's just divine. I don't know how else to explain it, man. It really feels like it was given to me for this specific reason at this specific time to tell these stories and help to kind of like tell the story of Ghana and the colors and the textures and the music and the food and everything to an audience that may not be familiar or may not even have an opportunity to go to Ghana. You know what I mean? So I can bring that to you. And I think that's what it's all about, man.
It's a beautiful partnership. Truly, dude, whether that was like brought on by your team, their team, both, I don't need to know, but like cheers to both sides on that.
Thank you, man. It was a wild ride. We started around the pandemic as far as like ruminating the idea around, and 4 years just about to get that whole thing going. And shout out to Todd Kaufman, who is a licensor at Bullfrog, who reached out during the pandemic. I was supposed to open up a restaurant in DC. I couldn't because of the actual COVID situation. So I started teaching classes online with the recipes that I would have cooked in DC. So I took those recipes, essentially just taught them online. Todd Kaufman took a class, was a fan of Top Chef, took a class, and just randomly put it out there. He's like, hey, man, you have a great story. Would you be interested in talking to a lifestyle brand, Crate and Barrel? I can maybe get you in front of them. And I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. And then literally he put his money where the mouth is and made it happen. So a huge partnership, man. Crate and Barrel is, they're awesome. Really cool.
So cool. Speaking of restaurants, any updates for us?
Yeah, man. I appreciate that. Dude, it's the transition smooth, man. I'm working on a space right now in Washington, D.C. Yes, sir. Restaurant's going to be called Elmina, Elmina. And I'm so excited. Contemporary African food, focusing on like West African plates, but showing love to the entire diaspora. And we're doing it tapa style, small plates. I want to really be able to have the folks in D.C. and all the other guests that come into the district to get a true sense in the flavors and the cuisine of West Africa. But I'll be the first to admit our food can be very heavy and it can knock you out. So I want to do it in small plates and be able to slowly introduce these flavors in really cool, unique ways, man. So I'm so excited and thrilled, and kind of feels like a culmination of all this hard work and everything that we've been talking about coming to a nice sort of like pass right now. So can't wait to serve the people out in DC, man. I can't wait to have you out there, bro, and serve you up as well, man.
Love it. Elmina is one word, yeah? What is the meaning?
So Elmina is a town in Ghana, and the meaning actually means treasure, a gold mine. And that to me really represents the food, but then also the people that come from that area, and how really Ghanaian culture has hit so many different parts of the world in total. And you'll see that woven literally all throughout the design in the restaurant, and just weaving in the ties of like Ghanaian culture and heritage and music and food, obviously, and everything else. So we're going to try to really like engulf all senses with the music. When you walk in there, you're going to hear that upbeat Afro beat. The drinks are going to be very eclectic. The food is going to be amazing as well. The vibe is going to be strong. So yeah, man, it's just trying to capture all five senses while you're in there.
We mentioned your website earlier, and I, was struck again by something on it. It went on to say that Chef Adjepong's career has thus far been a study in bravery. Do you think of yourself as a fearless person?
I do, mostly because, now I'm going to say this with a grain of salt, like nobody gets to a point of success without having other people around and having sort of like a village to prop you up. But I have relied on my kind of self-worth, my own wit. And we talk about risk, that word comes up again, taking calculated risks and just rolling with the dice and rolling with the outcome. So I have done some pretty amazing and silly things, going to a country I've never been before to live, competing on a national television show, partnerships, and really putting myself out there. But I think all of that is to get me in the position that I'm in right now. So that is brave. Yeah, I definitely see that. But again, I felt like to that point earlier, man, one of my favorite books is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And it's about doing hard things on purpose. You know what I mean? Doing the hard things in your life specifically to better yourself, to see what your life would be like at the end of whatever it was that you did that was very difficult for you. And I live my life that way, man. Do hard things on purpose so you can be better. Is it Jack Daniels? Yeah, Jack Daniels has a very similar line. Like our process of making bourbon is long on purpose. Like it takes a very long time for a reason, because to get the quality out of it, you really need the time. Time is a huge ingredient. And yeah, I definitely feel brave, but it's all about having one life, man, and just going for it.
Oh man, you just said so many things I want to
Let's talk
go
about
off on. One of them, when I was in culinary school, I remember we had to split off in groups, and people would go to a certain station because they knew how to do it. Mm-hmm, and I think what made culinary school exciting to me was I went to the station. I don't know why I did this, but maybe a chef instructor told me one time. I went to the station where I knew the least about, or the least of how to do it. Because if I'm going to a station on how to make chicken stock for the 100th time, I probably know how to make chicken stock. But if I'm going to the station how to make a terrine or whatever, and I've only made a terrine once, you should probably practice a terrine again. But it's interesting, the risk in the Ryan Holiday, who I'm a big fan of as well.
Yeah, man, it really is about pushing yourself and getting past that point, man. That sort of stoic mindset and way of thinking has been a paved street for me, man. It's truly how I think about and handle my business, man, and life. So can't get up too much, can't get down too much, but always recognize the things that you do, even though they're not important, it is important. And just give yourself a grain of salt with everything. So listen, man, everything that I'm doing right now, bro, is so important to me. It's like my life's passion. But with that said, bro, like it's other things as well that's super important.
Yeah, I love it. I want to hit upon social impact and giving back. Talked about this for a second before we started, but the podcast celebrates this with every guest. And it's one of the main reasons we started it was to shine a light on this incredibly generous community. And all of our guests do it in a different way. Some people have their own organization, some support a cause, an organization, fundraising, there's many different ways. But I would love for you to share some of the work you have done and do in the community, because I know you've done quite a bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I think with us and chefs, we kind of have that really cool skill set to impact a lot of people at once with food. I think it's like music and food that can really reach the masses at a really accelerated rate all at once. So with that sort of onus and kind of understanding of our power, so to speak, you have to do better with it. And to bring out that corny, that super Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility type thing. But it's so true, man. And I'm very blessed to be working with partners like Save the Children right now, who really do an amazing job with child nutrition. And that's what I'm focusing on specifically. I have a trip to Malawi that I'm very, very excited. They're coming up in a couple of weeks and get to see the amazing work that they've been doing over in South Africa. And then, man, so many other philanthropic things as well. Working with Spike Medelson here in DC, and he's just like a champion when it comes to DC food rights and the food banks out here. So he's been someone that I've been very inspired by and just want to be close to as I watch him and chefs like Jose Andres and so many other people with great platforms do amazing things that are just not selfish. You know what I mean? It's all about other people. And I think to a certain point, we all have that responsibility. So I'm just trying to do my part in that regard.
Love it. Watch out for Spike.
Yes, sir, man.
He's a good dude. I had a crazy trip to Greece with Spike many years ago. Went to his hometown. It was wild, man.
I can't even imagine. Spike is a guy. Yeah, he's a wild guy.
Yeah, he's a good dude, but he does a lot of incredible work to give back. Would you say like your master's of public health or international public health comes into play here?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I start to think about food from a very big top-down kind of view, very holistically. And from a chef's perspective, I feel like we look at food from like a plate or maybe like a few plates, like one single plate. And how can I use this one plate to feed a bunch of people? But then in a public health sense, I look at food from like a grandiose kind of POV and how can a large scale of food affect a bunch of people, and using my mind in a different way with math and still having to be creative, because having to serve people in different settings and backgrounds and stuff like that is always interesting and tricky as well. But I think that education paired with my education in Johnson & Wales, and I can technically put together any sort of like cooking vessel and apparatus and setting, but then also the qualitative again, like how best can I make sure that this food is satiating and nourishing and all that.
Appreciate that, man, and appreciate all that great work you do. We'll do a quick speed round and then we'll close it out.
Yes, sir.
Number one, what did you have for dinner last night?
Ooh, I had 2 hot dogs and a Caesar salad.
Name a smell in the kitchen you love.
Ooh, chocolate.
Name a smell in the kitchen you hate.
Rancid, burned. Yeah.
What pisses you off in the kitchen?
Not taking the time to develop flavor.
I like that. What makes you happy in the kitchen?
Good energy, people, just being around good people. Yeah.
What actor is playing Eric Adjepong in the movie?
Oh, geez. That's a good one. Who would play me? Idris Elba. Idris Elba could do it.
All right. So one last question. If you could only eat one PepsiCo Foods brand for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It's a tough one. It's been a fixture of my life since college. The Fritos Honey Barbecue Twist, man, are absolutely delicious. Those are my favorite. Top 1, not even 2. It's not even close. I started eating them in college, man. And since then, bro, I've been hooked.
I'm trying to come up with a way to incorporate it into my Thanksgiving dinner, which I feel like I may make some kind of grain salad and like fold them into that for crunch, or is there a way to work it into like my stuffing mixture?
Stuffing, I think, would be really, really unique. It's such a, like the honey, a little bit of if you add some like dried cranberries or some dried fruit right there, I think that'd be a really cool, nice, unique pairing too, man. So many cool ways to use it. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, the flavor, the texture. There's a lot that those brands can add, those products can add to dishes. How about if you could only use one in your cooking? What would it be?
I would feel it would have to be somewhat neutral, right? Something that you can kind of add different things to, right? I am a sucker for sauce. I'm a sucker for anything to dip in. So I'm going Sabras, I'm going the hummus, and I'm thinking like I can add whatever. I can make it into a base for like, I don't know, a marinade for like, let's say a roasted chicken or turkey. Thanksgiving's coming up, right? You can use that. Or you can even just have it as the topping, like a vegan topping for nachos or something like that, and add some really cool, unique like cheeses to that. So I would say that, man. That's probably my fix. Yeah, man. What about you?
Oh man, if I could only use one in my cooking, that Cheeto, as they call it, that Cheetos dust, you know, something about that. I feel like it's like this like magical ingredient that can like enhance so many dishes.
It can do, and it, you know what's so cool about the Cheeto dust? It can be disguised, but then also you can make it the star. It's so many different ways to like incorporate it within the, like you said, within your dish, man.
All right, man, you hit upon a couple of things that are coming up next, the restaurant and whatnot, and your trip to Malawi. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, man. Restaurant coming out, trip to Malawi next year, March. My cookbook will be out as well. So I'm super excited for that. And Gone Into the World is out for pre-order right now as we speak. So go to wherever you will get a book, where books are sold worldwide. You'll definitely find it there. And yeah, man, just cheers, dude. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, man.
Always good to have you on, man.
Thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time. And for everyone listening, if this episode doesn't make you want to try more West African food, I don't know what will, but I'm really excited to dive in. And thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Cappy, man. A pleasure, dude. Thank you.
Thanks again to Eric Adjepong. Find him on Instagram at Chef Eric Adjepong or at chefadjepong.com. To learn more about Save the Children, go to savethechildren.org. We'll share links in the episode notes and at beyondtheplatepodcast.com. This episode was produced by myself, along with Ian Cohen, Joel Yetton, and Sean Petrosian. Our digital media producer is Sarah McClellan-Mead. Our music has been composed by Goldford. Find him at iGoldford. As always, special shout out to my wife, Katie. If you have not started following me yet, you should. Find me across all social media at On Kathy's Plate, or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com and keep up to date with Beyond the Plate. Beyond the Plate is also on social at BT Plate Podcast. If you have a moment, we'd be grateful of your support by rating, reviewing, and even hitting that subscribe button to the podcast. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy, and remember, there are never too many cooks in the kitchen.